Hello, fellow Americans. You are on the YouTube channel Common Constitutionalism, and I am Mitch. I talk about issues in our government, the erosion of our culture, the minimizing of our way of life, and the disregard for our Constitution. Let's talk about the power of mainstream and social media. I've been talking a number of years now about the obvious bias in mainstream media. I know that seems to a lot of people like it's not a big deal. It's easy to say that because of the First Amendment, people have the right to say what they think and feel. I understand that, and while that is true, I want to bring an issue to the table that when it is the mainstream media, the news, I believe a higher standard must be held. I believe extra care must be taken as to how that news is presented. There's a difference between a news correspondent and an opinionist. I think it is very important that the difference between the two must be understood by the listeners and viewers. I also believe it is a responsibility of the news correspondent to not interject their opinions into the news, as doing so can cause misinformation and sway millions to a misunderstood reality. People need to know there's a difference between the news correspondent and an opinionist, such as Bill Maher, the women on The View, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Laura Ingraham, or Rush Limbaugh. The news is meant to inform us of issues in our country and around the world so we have real knowledge to form our own opinions. Opinion programs inform the listener about certain subjects and then proceed to tell the listener their own opinion on the issue. This is completely different from the responsibility of a news correspondent and how they should not interact with the listener. The mainstream media, the one who is supposed to be reporting the news, they are the problem. You can go back in time just 30 years ago when the news was presented totally different. It is sad. What is sad is that the younger generation really has no idea. Someone has to be nearly 40 years old to know what the real news is, to know what real news looks like or sounds like. Back then, we did not have 100 different news networks giving 24/7 news around the clock every day. Back then, we had ABC, NBC, and CBS. That was it. They were on the air once, maybe twice a day. They had an hour to tell you the news. That was it. They didn't have the time to opine. They gave the news and got off the air. Today, these programs are so blatantly biased. They supposedly are giving us the news, but instead it ends up being a talk show, and they fill the time with personal opinion. It is these opinions that are meant to purposely persuade and brainwash their listeners in a certain direction. They present it as the news, but unfortunately, they rant their biased opinions filled with propaganda, disdain, and fake news to advance their agendas. This is what's wrong. I want everyone to understand the power this wields. When day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute, from channel to the next channel, the power they have to persuade the listener in one direction or another, it is just wrong to utilize such power in this underhanded, fake, perverse way. This is what the Democrat Party has become. They have adopted a tactic of I'm going to call it brain overload. Frankly, the Democrats and mainstream media have become very good at it. Their nonstop barrage of propaganda, fake news, ideology is pushed onto their viewers. The changes the mainstream media has taken over the last 20 years has been extreme. The liberal mainstream media's market share is probably 70% of the nation. And there are very few to oppose the liberal mainstream media's view. There is Fox News, OAN, Max, Newsmax, The Hill, and a few more. The liberal mainstream media has a lot of power and advantage in numbers. The liberal media enjoys a 13-to-1 ratio of networks over conservative media. Narrowing it down to the last 12 years when Obama came on the scene in 2008, there was an immediate overnight change in the way the liberal media began to operate. The liberal media spent 8 years drooling all over themselves with a good feeling running down their legs for Barack Obama. They went out of their way to make everything he said or did seem fantastic. The liberal media did everything they could to shield him and cover up anything Obama did that might come across as wrong or no good. The liberal media was part of the cover-up on Russia collusion. They became part of the scheme to protect Obama and his administration from all the wrongdoing. We are now learning the facts of Obama, his administration, and the deep state's many illegal schemes. So jump back to 5 years ago when Donald Trump announced his candidacy in 2015. We saw the mainstream media take on a complete opposite role, especially after he won the presidency. We watched as they began implementing a daily vulgar barrage of negativity towards Trump and anything conservative, while continuing their cover-up, protection, and co-agenda with the Democrat Party. This is when the mainstream media began putting their twist on everything, opining their own creative narrative of the world. That narrative became their news, their truth. They have been an active part of pushing this radical agenda. Mainstream media's willingness and willing participation to perpetuate the fake Russia collusion rhetoric and anti-Trump propaganda created a never-Trump movement. Plus, their refusal to present the news fairly and cover the Democrat Party equally. They buried negative press about the left's agenda and the candidates. Obvious examples would be the Biden family dealings in foreign governments and businesses. Biden's failed 47 years in Washington, D.C. politics, and Biden's sexual allegations, assault allegations. Mainstream media's bias probably affected 15 million votes in the 2020 election. Now we have the big tech putting their personal bias into censorship. The First Amendment rights of anyone who posts opinions in opposition to its extreme leftist views. It has become a concerted effort by liberal mainstream media, Facebook, Twitter, Google, LinkedIn, etc., to eliminate information posted on their social pages which they do not want seen. This Marxist fascist censoring has proved to be a successful vote suppressing tactic. In the Epoch Times article titled "Almost 10% of Biden voters in key states wouldn't have voted for him had they known about Hunter Biden's dealings" survey, published November 24th, 2020. This survey showed stunning confessions by some who voted for Biden in the 7 battleground states. Some results of this survey, for example, had voters been shown allegations of Biden and his son Hunter's business dealings with officials and firms in China, Ukraine, and Russia, 9.4% of those polled said they would not have voted for Biden. Another one, had voters known about sexual assault allegations raised against Biden by a former Senate aide named Tara Reid, 8.9% of them said they would not have voted for Biden. From 1/3 to more than 1/2 of Biden voters said they hadn't heard about at least one of the 8 stories prior to the November 3rd election, with, for example, 25.3% claiming no knowledge of Kamala Harris's Senate voting record, 50.5% who were unaware the United States had achieved energy independence under Trump. Almost half, 45.1% of the respondents said they heard or read nothing reported in the national media about Hunter Biden's scandal prior to November 3rd. And 35.4% didn't know about Tara Reade's accusations against former Vice President Biden. If you doubt the power that social media and big tech had in swaying this 2020 presidential election to Biden, frankly, your head is in the sand. The way social media censored any opposition to their viewpoint, their censorship swayed probably around 2 million votes to Biden. It is infuriating that in the United States of America, we have allowed the Marxist fascist Democrat Party to take control of so many important segments of our constitutional federal republic. It is the American people who voted these American haters into office. This only proves the deep division America is facing. There is, I believe, around 25% of the country, radically liberal, who are pushing the Marxist fascist ideology. Then there is another 25% who are uninformed, indoctrinated sheeple who blindly follow what they have been brainwashed to do. This is the mass on the ground doing the grunt work. This group is made up of mostly the younger indoctrinated populace. Their purpose is to create divisiveness, havoc, discontent, and anarchy using the tools given to them, such as white privilege, wokeness, BLM, Antifa, mainstream, and social media. This mass of populace is funded and controlled by radical elitists, progressives, and social globalists who are using them to carry out their dirty work, keeping their hands clean and identities behind the curtains, pulling the puppet strings. I'm talking about the global socialist, climatist, environmentalist, academist, big tech, big corporations, billionaire elitist and their Marxist fascist political cronies. You know, George Soros, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. It's this 50% of the United States population who want to burn America down and then rebuild it into the oligarchy government they want. The power handed to the American mainstream media is akin to state-run media one finds in communism and fascism. Media under state-controlled conditions can only release news the governments allow. There is no First Amendment. Though our present American brand of news is not yet state-run, it does, however, have the equivalent power as it is in bed with the Democrat Party. Everyone must understand the power the media has when a political party has taken over the narrative of that media. This is why communist and fascist governments first take over the media and then begin eliminating all opposition to their agenda. Throughout history, these forms of government have murdered hundreds of millions of their own people. I want people to understand the importance of that power and the control that the mainstream media imposes on anyone who listens to the message. How being the mouthpiece of a political party gives them a massive platform to manipulate the message into whatever they choose, as long as they continue to spread the propaganda of the party that they betrothed. Thank you. I would appreciate you all exploring, donating, subscribing, joining, and shopping on my sites. Until next time, this is Common Constitutionalism, and I am Mitch. Thank you, America.